in the moment, and it's a follow-up from, for some people, from earlier this summer. So the next one. I am Kim Ramadan. I'm a UN North Carolina New Teacher Support Program that's run through UNC Charlotte. If you were at TEI, I presented with LaTanya.
And I'm LaTanya Gaines Montgomery. I am a faculty site coordinator at UNC Charlotte as well. And I work in the middle secondary department, supervising student teachers.
So today, we are going to through a WebEx, which I don't know how much you have with it. It's easy to get distracted in this situation just because there's so many other things going on. But I just ask that for the time that we're together, that we're all in, that we're just kind of being appropriate with other tech that we might have or the computer that we have open. And then also just in the discussion, we're going to ask some questions and ask you to kind of respond. So if there's only one person, Jared, you're going to read. Just if you will volunteer to respond as we ask questions. And so today we're going to look at phases 1 through 4 with Get Better Faster by Paul Van Brick Santoyo. Look at the scope and sequence, and also LaTanya is going to connect that to the trajectories, the year-long and student teacher trajectories, and strategies that hopefully you can apply tomorrow with your student teacher. I'll answer any questions that you have at the end. And so basically this I don't know how familiar you are with the Get Better Faster text, but it's to help teachers improve their practice within 90 days. It's written for beginning teachers in mind, thinking that if they go through this trajectory, that they can be very successful after this 90 days. And so the first phase is actually in the summer. And for you all, since you're just starting, since your student teachers are just starting, it may be happening right now, probably is. And it's supposed to be before students are present. Phase 2 is the first 30 days of school. Is supposed to be after that. And then phase 4 is 61 to 90 days after the beginning of school. We'll talk a little bit about how that's kind of adjusted and things that we recommend along the way. That's you.
So this is the beginning, phase 1, Get Better Faster. And so like Kim just said, phase 1 is usually done in the summer, but we do recommend that phase 1 is done at any point in the semester where you feel that your student teacher needs to rehearse. And it also may not even be a need for your student teacher to rehearse, but maybe for you to see them practice what they plan to do in the class. So I can tell you in a previous semester, I had a teacher that actually went back to phase 1 because the student teacher was going to try small groups and had not done that before. And so she wanted to give her some pointers on it. So they went back and did a phase 1 with that lesson plan to make sure that she was comfortable, to make sure that the clinical educator, CE, could give her feedback on some things that she needed to be mindful of as this teacher was getting ready to implement small groups in a high school English classroom. So phase 1 is supposed to be during the summer, but as you can see, it says pre-teaching. So anytime a pre-teaching situation presents itself, then you can use phase 1. And within phase 1, within phase 1, you're basically looking at the classroom management as well as a little bit of the rigor from the lesson plans. But the main focus is the routines and procedures, the strong voice, the precise directions, and the things that a teacher needs to make the classroom successful or to set the environment to be successful. Within phase 2, you are kind of doing the same thing, but you are fine tuning some smaller tools that student teachers need to be using, such as what to do. Like, what do you want them to do? How can you take what you want them to do and put it in very clear, crisp, concise directions? And so many people use what's called a strategy, MVP, movement, voice, and participation. What do you want them to do to participate? What voice level do you want them to do it at? And how are they moving? How do you want them to transition to where you want them to go? So looking at those types of things, looking at the routines and procedures more finely this time, and making sure you're paying attention, as well as the student teachers paying attention to the details of what's happening in the lesson. And then looking at the teacher radar, making sure that the students can see the teacher looking at them to kind of curb some off-task behavior. And then if the class or instruction is not going well, having a whole class reset. So the biggest difference between phase 1 and phase 2 is that phase 1 is pre-teaching. So it's before students are actually teaching, student teachers are teaching. Phase 2 actually happens when they have students in front of them and they are actually rolling out their lesson plan and implementing the strategies and activities that they've planned with students. And these are things that you can look at and support them with while they're teaching. And also in phase 2, you're really looking at the rigor. What are the exemplars? What are you looking for students to be able to do? How have you set the independent practice? What do you want them to do? How is it connected to your standards? And then monitoring what they're doing. So teaching them how to aggressively monitor to look to see if students are actually getting what they set out for them to get with their lesson plan and implementation. In phase 3, now we're looking at the use of multiple strategies to evoke pacing, to evoke momentum within the lesson, making sure that they are engaging all students, that they're narrating the positive, and having some individual student correction. So kind of eye contact, nonverbal communication with students when things are not going well in the lesson. These are things that students learn to do, but they have to use multiple behavioral tools to support that. And so during this phase, you can also do some in the moment coaching to support them as well. And you're also looking at rigor to look at the habits of evidence. What do you notice that students are doing? What's the evidence that you can see as a student teacher? So helping to direct their focus in that. Checking for whole group understanding. How are they asking questions? Are they kind of keeping track of the data that they are collecting with the informal assessments throughout the classroom? And then reteaching. So if students aren't getting it, how am I going to reteach this? And making sure that they're planning more than one strategy as they are preparing for their lesson. And finally, phase 4, which is the 61st through the 90th day, is when we're really looking at small group work and students engaging in small groups. This is also where we're looking at discourse and the types of prompts and higher order thinking questions that are used to engage students and cause them to have dialogue. So this is not a closed questioning. It's more of an open questioning where they have to have dialogue and kind of use some evidence to support their statements. So this is phase 4 of Get Better Faster. And I can probably tell you now, your student teachers, having been with you for maybe a week or so now, are probably in the earlier phases because you want to make sure those are solid. There's a next step, stretch it, where the management strategies are pretty much in play consistently, and your focus is really on continuing the discourse and taking students to a more conceptual level. So they're thinking, they're looking at procedures, trying to figure out why did that work, or why did it work one time and not work the other time. So they're trying to verbalize conceptual understandings using their academic vocabulary, and then using the academic vocabulary to extend their learning and also apply it in other ways. So stretch it is far off. There are some student teachers that actually get to this stretch it, and that's okay. There are some student teachers who get to phase 3 and are still working at phase 3 and phase 4 as they are entering into the classroom, and that is okay as well. This is more of a a guide to tell you how to help your student teacher throughout the semester, but you definitely don't want to hold them to this line as if it has to be done by a certain amount of time. This is definitely built based on your student teacher's needs and abilities.
So when it in the moment coaching, I think that in some cases it can be something that is like hard to do for many different reasons. But is actually from the text as well. And it talks about how if a doctor is performing surgery on a child, we would expect somebody who doesn't have experience, we would expect that mentor to step in if there were anything that were going wrong. And this is really important. With me, when my son was 4 months old, he had surgery on his skull. And if there was it's a neurosurgeon that was performing who was new, a novice surgeon, I would expect that experienced surgeon to step in and to make sure that they're doing their job. And it's no different in the classroom. If we see our student teachers doing things that are not, what's right for kids, whether big or small, it's going to affect them in the long run, and those really are your students. So it really is that serious in terms of like why in the moment coaching is important. And that to me is a really interesting way to think about it, and something that we need to make sure that we're doing all the time.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah. All right, so let's look at the trajectory. So this is a hypothetical coaching trajectory. And if you currently have a student teacher, that means your student teacher should have had a year-long internship prior to student teaching, where they were able to observe and do some practice with the clinical educator in very small, granular ways. So teaching one lesson or teaching part of a lesson or doing some non-instructional type tasks. And so that's where you can do a lot of the practice with phase 1 and phase 2. And then as they transition into student teaching, then they should be employing more of the instructional practices on their own. So we say that they may start in phase 2 or phase 3. Just again, depends on individual student teacher ability levels. And then they should be transitioning into phases 3 and 4 towards the middle of March to the end of April, when they're finishing up their student teaching. Basically what we want them to do, and if your student teacher is new with you this semester and did not do a year-long internship with you last semester, you would want to start at the beginning, all the way to the left where it says relationship building. So relationship building basically with your student teacher, as well as your student teacher building relationships with your students. Modeling and co-teaching would be a great intro into transitioning them from being a support in the classroom to actually teaching. And then allowing them to do some sideline huddle and guidance. And we're going to talk to you more about those in the moment coaching strategies in just a minute. But then kind of doing some cognitive coaching. Now, cognitive coaching is more data collection and more data driven. And so if you are a Teacher Education Institute, TEICE, then you know about the cognitive coaching and the paperwork that needs to be done. Otherwise, if you are not a TEI grant CE, then you don't need to worry necessarily about the cognitive coaching. But just look at the sideline huddle guidance and the other co-teaching practices to support your student teacher as they grow this semester. And also, if you are part of TEI, at the bottom you will see management being the first piece of the coaching emphasis that they would like for you to participate in with your student teacher as far as the TEI grant. And then the other focus practices are also there. Starting with whole group discussion. Starting with eliciting and interpreting student thinking, managing and setting up small groups, and then facilitating whole class discussions. So that's kind of the trajectory for the TEI folks. All right, let's get into phase 1 and see how this looks. So phase one is the pre-teaching phase, and it's where the dress rehearsal takes place. So this is where you want to see a student practice. You're looking at their lesson plan, and they are practicing without students, which is what we call a session zero. So they are doing this without students present, and you will coach them through this. Let's watch a coach do this session zero session. And then, Jared, since you are our participant today, I want you to kind of think about what you see and think about how you may use this. And if you would share, I'm going to unmute you after we watch the video during our discussion to just share how you plan to use this with your student teacher this semester.
30 seconds to review over your script, because in 30 seconds, we're going to go ahead and we are going to role play just this part right here, all the way up through the goal.
Great job. Okay, 2 minutes, turn and talk.
Seems like we lost audio on the.
Okay. Maybe because I muted myself.
Want me to just explain what's happening?
Now you put 2 students at one time.
Can you hear now?
Pause. When you see right there, right where exactly where you were, what is a drawback of that particular body position at this moment?
Maybe can't see the rest of the students.
So how do you use that as a hotspot but still be able to monitor the rest of the room?
Move it, just messed up here.
Perfect. So go back to there, because from back there you can see the whole class, and for this hotspot, be on the outside so you're still facing the rest of the class.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, track me. What changes to the government legislation is the Pope proposing? Diane.
Awesome. Let's move back to our binder.
That felt better.
Perfect. Tell me why.
It felt better because it's like it seems more fluid. It's a lot more fluid, and it helps me, like, if you, as you're circulating, and like you're not spending too much time, but just like I said before, just able to understand what the students are saying and what their thought process is.
Okay. So, Jared, after watching this video and seeing what this coach, the interaction between the coach and the student teacher, what are your thoughts, and how would you plan to use this pre-planning strategy with your student teacher?
We actually did some very similar things today, because she's going to pick up her first class this Thursday,
Okay.
because our district started sooner than most, so she's been there for 2 weeks. But I was doing a lot of that, except we didn't really do like the physical role playing around the room, but I did talk about like classroom management issues that could arise and how she could deal with those things as they come up, questions she should ask, and just general routines and things like that.
Okay. Okay. Do you think that she would benefit from the role play, or do you think she would feel like that would be something good for her? How would you feel about doing that with her the next time before she teaches?
Yeah, we might try that.
And I
We
think
did.
um, once you kind of see, once she gets into her first class, you may back up and once you notice kind of what she's struggling with. You know what I mean? Sometimes it is like, sometimes it's things like patience, things like her movement around the classroom or like that. Like in that video, it was kind of hard to tell what she was giving him feedback on, but she was trying to get him to really lean in so that he could notice the work that students were doing. And so it seems like kind of silly to do that, but it really does help to get the working memory for whatever the thing is that she kind of is struggling with. Does that make sense? So you may not know like right now if she hasn't really taught anything, but you may have more of a sense in a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, good, good. Thank you for clarifying that, Kim. And Jared, we are going to have a follow-up on March 17th, which we'll talk about a little bit. But if you are interested in videoing any of your practice with in the moment coaching, we would love to be able to share just your work and your experience with doing that as a new CE.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're going into
All right.
phase two.
We are going on to phase two.
All right, so phase two is typically so for beginning teachers, it would be in September, but obviously for you, it would be now with your student teacher. You can always come back to phase two, so it's not something that, you know, you set it and forget it. Like there are definitely times where we started on to something else in phase three and we need to go back because we have lost traction in a certain area. So just to go through, it's a little small on your screen, but if you can kind of see, it starts with what to do. So using economy of language is something that I talk. So I coach beginning teachers, but they would be right after you. You know, we are seeing your student teachers, so they're very much in the same place. And its economy of language is making sure that you are saying what you need to say in a very clear and concise way. It's really about being concise. And so instead of when I'm giving a direction, instead of saying, okay, so when I say go, you know, you guys are supposed to put your book bags away, right? So like when I say go, I need you to put your book, you don't need all those words, right? When I say go, put your book bag away, go. Like it's very clear, concise, especially when you're giving directions or really anytime. A lot of teachers need that. They just say too many words sometimes. They don't need them. So routines and procedures 2.0 is all about that in phase one, you do routines and procedures 1.0 where you're basically like practicing them. And then in 2.0, you're perfecting them and making sure that they're where they need to be. So you might have them do things like you might review any routines and procedures. So like I was saying, you may go back to phase one and have practice without students there. It feels safer then. You might also have do it again where in the moment, if they aren't doing something correctly, let's say that they're coming in from first block to second block and they come in and everybody's loud and it's chaotic. You might have the teacher, student teacher, have the students do it again. Everybody back in the hallway and then give a direction and then go, you know, so literally do things over again if it's not quite right. And then teacher radar. So that's kind of what we were talking about earlier in terms of students knowing that you're paying attention. And then you also, so the first thing is choosing three to four hot spots, places where you know that you might need to be paying more attention to students. Be seen looking is kind of a lot of times I tell teachers when they're doing small groups, this is really important, where kids need to know that you are looking at them. So I might be leaning in, I might be working with a small group in the back of the room, but I pop my head up almost like a turtle coming out of, you know, the water, how they kind of pop their head up and like look around. That's what it means is like I have my eyes on all of you, even though I'm with this small group. It's something really hard for beginning teachers because it's hard for them to think about more than one thing at a time. So that's really difficult. And then whole class reset. So there are times when you just need to make sure that like all students are with you. And if they're not, then just stopping everyone, like doing your attention getter, stopping everyone, giving a direction. And we're going to talk more about precise directions and positive narration later. but that's really what that's all about. So next, we are going to take a look at some videos. So after each video, I kind of just want to have a real quick discussion, and so we'll unmute you, Jared, about like what you see in the video, and then at the end, I want to talk about maybe what you've done already and what you might want to try. So the first one is we call it whispering in, but it's also sideline or a silent signal. Nope, just kidding, not whispering. Sideline or silent signal is when you're in the back of the room and you give a teacher a signal that's silent. So you're not using your words at all. In this case, they use a whiteboard in the back of the room. Latanya, sometimes I know that she passes a sticky note to somebody, or she's even gotten tricky enough where she might text them and they see something on their Apple Watch. So they know that like they need to be looking, and that's a way to send a message. This is nice because it's not as much, I would say, as verbally talking to the teacher. So it just kind of takes out the noise, really with that. So go ahead.
The radical form of the square root of 8. What did I do here? Looking at my work. What are my steps? Exactly. And I created two factors that I can multiply with what? 18. Now, what was so special on one of my two factors? Back to the other. I want to get started. Something about this square. Track that. On that. Track that.
All right. Choppy. I don't know if it was on your end or not, but what did you notice? What could you tell her? Maybe what questions do you have if you couldn't really see everything?
Yeah, I couldn't exactly see what she had written, but
Yeah, so on the board she wrote track, and then because she wanted her to have this, the teacher wanted the teacher to say track, let's track Jared, and then all the students would turn towards that one student. It's just kind of like a procedure that they have in place in this particular school. Not saying that you need to do that, but she wrote track and then the student, and then again, and then after that, she wrote scan in parentheses, and the scan was something that she wanted the teacher to do, not say. So scan, like look around at all of your students. So that was, she put it in, they had as an understood agreement that they, if it's in parentheses, I don't want you to say it. I just want you to do. And then the thing she wrote, just to, it two things that were important in terms of classroom management.
yeah, I think that's a great idea. All of my students sit at tables, so eyes are sort of pointing at all, or could potentially be pointing at all different points of the room. So I probably wouldn't use a whiteboard just because I would be wary of undermining
So
my
I wonder
students.
about passing like a sticky, and the whole idea is to just make it silent. I mean, and there are other in the moment strategies that may work better for you too. Not saying you have to use all of these at all in any case, but that's just a way for there not to be noise. They're obviously going to see you pass that note, but like maybe that's a way to kind of do it on the sly without them seeing the whiteboard, you know?
Yeah, that's probably what I'll do, or we can work out some more discreet like hand signals or something. But that's a good idea, and I'll probably use that.
Yeah, and the hand signals are also good, or like cue cards, those types of things. So yeah, it's just like she said, you finding the basically with silent or sick sideline, the least invasive way to interrupt but still help at the same time.
So for the next video we're going to watch, it's actually two gentlemen. The coach is in the back of the room to begin with. It's a history class. History, is that right? Oh, it's muted. You teach history, Jared?
Yes.
Okay. I have no idea. They're talking about the Torah and something else. But so if it's choppy, it'll be hard to understand. But trying to get the kids to draw a connection between the two and extend their thinking in some way. And the kids are really like surface level with their answers. They're not getting to like the meat of the question. And so instead of writing the question down or like any of the other strategies, the coach who's in the back of the room stands up and asks to the students, but it's very purposeful. So I could imagine this is something that you could use a lot, and you can tell me when this is over, because you're going to want to make sure at the end of the day that the rigor is in your classroom, and the level of thinking that you want them to do. And so this might be a really easy way to like help your student teacher out if they're not quite getting there. Sometimes they can get stuck, and in the moment it's really hard to get yourself out of it. If you had a conversation later about it, the moment would not have learned it. So it's really important like to make sure that they're getting to the rigor that they need to. So let's watch the video. Hopefully we can hear it. If we can't hear it, I might just have you pause it, Latanya.
Okay.
One of the major differences is that the code of Hammurabi street seems to be harsher. For another one of here, another similarity, another quick similarity. Yes, you have. Okay, that's an eye for an eye. What about Omar? Yeah.
Oh, I think similarity.
How about another crucial difference? Nicole, yeah.
Different with the Torah is more merciful.
This is a crucial point, that there were differences based on social class. Okay, so in the Code of Hammurabi, there were different penalties based on social class, whereas in the Torah, everybody was treated equally.
Can I jump in for just a second, Mr. Cheeley? Interesting conversation. I was glad I could be here for that. That last point, that the Torah was not tied to social class, those punishments, how does that connect to the question about progress over time? Does that suggest there was or was not progress over time, and why? I don't know everyone's name, so can you tell me your name?
I said that we show progress before Babylon, social classes, how high or low you were in the green versus in the poor or
Perhaps. Yep. So let's jump into the lesson. I was so glad to see the seminar today. So thinking about the seminar and your script for the seminar, what was the most rigorous and provocative question in your script for the seminar?
I think the most provocative question was trying to ask them, and I realized I didn't give myself enough time for this question, but asking them, okay, where is their progress? Where does these differences between Hammurabi's code and the Torah show progress?
How does that question push the rigor of that discussion entirely to a different place?
Right. So formally, it's just sort of comprehension questions in terms of, okay, what is a difference? What is a similarity? So that just shows, okay, they've read it and they've noticed this is different from that. So point A to point B. I think Fawaz made that comment at the end that showed he understood, but I wasn't sure if the rest of the class kind of grasped that point.
Do you understand why I jumped in there at the end?
To sort of get to that rigorous, deep question.
Right. That was what my concern was.
Right.
I didn't know what they were going to walk away from this seminar.
Mhm.
Why do any of these discrete facts matter
Right.
at all? What does it show us? What thematic understanding from the history can we gain from recognizing these facts?
Right.
And then making that connection.
Okay.
And that was what was missing from the seminar.
Yeah.
All right. About that one.
I thought that was great, and my student teacher and I, we've already worked a little bit on this concept. So she has a very detailed pacing guide with typical activities and things that I do for each day, and it also has like the key questions, the key takeaway things that need to be asked. So hopefully she is going to have a heads up for those type of questions before she begins, but if I see it not happening, I think there are ways that I can step in and make sure that happens.
Think about it too is like, so if she has the big question, that big idea. Sometimes students need help and scaffolds like to get there, you know? So he asked first about like what are the similarities and what are the differences before he got to the big question. Now he wasn't getting to the big question, big idea question, but he was kind of staying there in like the lower level thinking. But sometimes it's hard if you ask that big level question and then it's like crickets and no one is saying anything. Like that might be where she might need some support. And I think
Right.
it's just about talking to her beforehand because and saying like if I ask a question, it's not because you're bad or doing anything wrong, but I'm just trying to help. I need to help. I want to help guide you. And then the discussion afterwards is critical too. So you get like why you asked the questions that you did, you know, but that question was towards the students. So it makes it really safe because it's not really about the teacher at that point, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So
And
the
I'll
next,
say, even though a teacher may write down the questions, so I know you say you talked with her. From my experience, sometimes they write those things down or write down those questions, but when they get in front of the students, their nerves kind of can get the best of them and they forget to ask those questions. And I think, like Kim said, telling her beforehand, hey, if I see any questions or if I think of any questions that we may not have discussed before that I think would really help, then I'll just jump in if that's okay. And kind of like he did, he said, is it all right for me to jump in? So that way you're kind of showing that mutual respect for another professional in the classroom.
Right. Yeah.
so the last one is, but it's going to cover two different strategies. So the strategies that this coach does, she's standing in the back of the room in the white. It's kind of hard to tell who she is because at first they're both kind of walking through and monitoring students. There are a couple different things she does. So a huddle or a whisper is what I use most often when I'm coaching, and that's just when you say something to the teacher really quickly in the moment, but you whisper it to them. So it's different than sideline because it's verbal, but it's a way to get some message across. You want to make sure that it's quick and it's concise. Otherwise, it can lead to behavior problems, as you can imagine. And the other thing that happens later in the video is co-teaching. So co-teaching is what it seems like, where the teachers are kind of teaching at the same time. So it's different than the question in the video above because she doesn't ask a question. She actually digs into like the content and teaching. But the huddle happens first, then the co-teaching happens after that. So let's take a look at what that looks like.
Take 30 more
What's the, you're adding 10 seconds and then you're forgetting some ones, or they're just not needs a classical strategy. So you're going to show the right one. Do you want to show an error? Yeah. And have after seeing the right one, be able to identify what's wrong.
I want you to notice what Kamaya Brown did. What are you noticing about her work? What are you noticing about her work, Julius?
I noticed that she was like work and she did it. A algorithm.
What do you mean by algorithm?
I think she did. She added all the numbers on the bar to add all the numbers together.
What else is a good mathematician when she used tens and ones?
Kamaya was also and number box.
Miss Engel, can we ask Kamaya? Kamaya, explain why you decided to split these numbers into tens and ones. Okay, so you added all your what together first? So you added the tens and ones all together all at the same time? So what did you do first? Okay. So she did what first, Anaya? I want you to think about Kamaya's strategy of using tens and ones, Tylea. And I want you to put in your own words what Kamaya did. What's the rule that she decided to follow? You're going to say it in your own words. When you have it, sit up nice and tall. How would you explain this to someone else? Turn and tell your partner.
So obviously in elementary school in math, but what do you think about like the co-teaching idea and the whisper or huddle idea?
I like both of those, and my student teacher and I have already done a lot of that. So,
Yay!
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like you have done a couple of these. The question and silent signal are things that you might try. And again, like not everything is going to work every time, you know? And not every student teacher or teacher is comfortable with all of those things either. So I think it's like, we want you to do in the moment coaching. There's power in it, but you don't have to do every single strategy every second, you know?
right.
Yeah. What is it? Is there something that you think you might be able to try tomorrow that you haven't already done?
I think coming up with a few signals is a good idea. Some way we can communicate without, me disrupting the class or undermining what she's trying to do. And the other things I think we already do a lot of those.
Yeah, so maybe think about and think of tomorrow. Maybe you don't start it tomorrow, but just think about what signals make the most sense for you to use in your content area. So in elementary school, I have teachers turn and talk a lot, or have the teachers tell the students to turn and talk a lot. So we have kind of a signal to indicate that. But you might need other signal for a different reason. And so maybe you think tomorrow what that signal might be, and then talk to her at the end of the day about doing it on, what's the next day? Thursday. And that way it's like, it can be really purposeful and something that would make sense in your content area.
Right. Yeah. We'll do that for sure.
Cool.
Thank you, Jared. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about phase 3. Again, this is where the student teacher should be building momentum, engaging all students, narrating the positive, kind of keeping track of the pacing, and then making individual student corrections as needed. One of the great things about that, the precise directions and positive narration, that sometimes it allows a teacher or student teacher not to have to do a whole lot of individual corrections, because the positive directions and precise directions and positive narration can sometimes help to curb some of the inappropriate behavior. And by precise directions, we mean helping a student teacher to understand that they have to do less talking, but keep the expectations the same. An example is the first bubble that we have at the top. When I call your table, silently stand up, pushing your chair and come to the carpet. So they know they're silent, they stand up, they push in their chair, they come to the carpet. Or clear, quick things that they want, the teacher wants the students to do. Of course, in high school, you would say, okay, when your notebooks are closed, then I'm going to turn on the video and your note sheets are out, and that's it. So then you know what you want them to do. So they know adults, they're older kids, they may know what an adult wants, but they need to clearly hear the adult say in very quick terms what to do. Close your notebooks, take out your note sheet, I'm turning the video on, take your notes. Like, kind of very clear and concise directions.
And I think sometimes we assume older that they know how to do things, or they know how to do things in the way that we want them to. And I think that's kind of a mistake. I think that we need to be really clear with kids, because when we get annoyed with them when they don't do something, we have to ask ourselves, did we ask them to do it? Did we tell them what we expected of them? And I think a lot of times we don't. We just make assumptions about kids who are older. Kindergarten, it's easy to know that they need direction for everything. But older kids do too. And I think sometimes we make assumptions. So I would just about and watch kind of your student teacher when she's giving directions, and see if she needs to break things down a little bit more.
Absolutely. And then narrating the positive, if you look at the bottom right here where it says blank is silent, you would put a student's name in there. So instead of them having to say, student X, stop talking, or I need you to stop talking and looking at student X, by isolating them, they can say, Maria is silent. Joshua pushed in his chair. Jose is moving to the carpet just like he's supposed to. Narrating what's positively happening in the classroom, or thanks, Alonda, for making sure your notebook's closed and your note page is out, your graphic organizer is out. So making sure they are narrating the positive, so that it doesn't feed the negative behavior that students sometimes will employ to get attention. So kind of helping them with that during phase 3, as well as doing some individual corrections, such as Peter, the direction was to move silently. This is your warning. So the last thing you want them to do is individual student corrections. And even if they do individual student corrections, you want to show them as a CE with experience how to do that, so that it doesn't blow up or it doesn't turn into a power struggle, but so that it can be quickly resolved, and then that the student teacher can return back to the instructional focus.
Is this me? Phase 4. Okay, I'm with you. So phase 4 is about engaging in small group work. How much small group work? You said your room isn't tables, so I'm guessing they do some small group work. Is that right?
Yeah. Just about every day we do some sort of small group work.
Okay, great. So phase 4 is all about, It's along the intention of like saying, okay, once we have the whole class is good now, so now we're ready to look at small groups of students. And I think that you might find that this might have to kind of be parallel to what's going on in phase 2 or phase 3 because you're doing it every day, so you're going to expect your teacher to do it every day. But so this is about making sure that you're maximizing the learning for every single group, making sure that there's step for that group. Make sure that you can easily see everybody, that you have a role for each person. No one's kind of just hanging out. There's timed instructions, and then secondary that student teacher is monitoring the group's progress and verbally reinforcing. So in elementary, we do a lot of the small group at the back of the table, and all the other students are doing something else. You may have students doing at their seats, at their tables, doing similar things. How does that student teacher, it's little things, like how does a teacher know what group to go to when, and also how does she make sure that she's visible to all the students and all the students know that she's watching. So it goes back to making sure that in phase 2, making sure that students really know that you're paying attention. She's got to face a certain way, like her back can't be to a group of students, or they're going to know that she's not paying attention to what they're doing. Really small things like that she may just not know that you're like, that you already know. So those verbal instructions, timers, things like that, to help monitor themselves and help her monitor them too. So you might be able to help data while in the moment. So I think there's a lot of benefit sometimes in your case to like sit back and instead of jumping in, maybe at times sit back and watch and kind of help the student teacher collect data. So which groups are like almost like a type thing for each group. That might be really helpful for her to really understand, and for you to understand what your next with her. Of course, you can always do coaching in the moment. There might be a small group that's a little bit more difficult to manage. You might help by modeling that group for her, something like that. Her with delivering monitoring the groups as they're going. So this is one of the last things we're going to do. So maybe we'll wrap up a little early today. So there is a video that we're going to show you. We just want you to think about all of the different coaching moves that we've talked about. So the sideline or the silent signal, and then whispering in or huddling or asking a question or guidance or co-teaching or tag teaming. Which one of these moves, there might be more than one. Let's pretend like this teacher is your student teacher. What might you do to help support this student teacher? So we're gonna watch a little bit of this video and then ask you to kind of respond with what you might do. Can't hear him.
Well, on.
Yeah.
Okay, we're missing some. Start that over.
All right, class, on yesterday we were talking about solving one-step equations. So I want to go back over that and continue on into two-step equations as well. To give you an example, -15 plus n is equal to -9, whereas n is your variable and -15 and 9 will be your constants. What you want to do, you want to get all your like terms on one side. Since we have positive end and a negative 15, we're going to add 15 to both sides. These will cancel out. What you have is n is equal to be a positive 6. Give you another example. X minus 7 is equal to 13. Then you want to put all your like terms together, all your constants, all your variables. In this case, we're going to add 7 both sides. These will cancel out. You'll have x is equal to 20. Show you one other thing. This first example. Sometimes the negatives may hang you up. So we're starting with a positive 15.
Tanya, you can probably. The whole thing, if that was your teacher, what coaching move might you do, and like what might that look like? I know it's not in your content, but we're going to ask you to reach just a little bit. What do you think you might do with that teacher?
I'm a big planner, so my student teacher and we already, like, I kind of try to help her plan for that sort of situation ahead of time, like having his back turned so much. In some classes that could be a big issue. So I would maybe try to have her write things like that out beforehand, or I might try to give her a silent signal to maybe have a student volunteer to do that while you coach them through it and keep your eye on the other ones.
Yeah, so I was wondering about like who's doing the work in that lesson. And
Yeah.
I know your lessons, and all the kids are working. But as LaTanya said, sometimes you get in the moment and you just start, maybe she just starts talking and you're like, wait a minute, we were supposed to have, more student interaction, and she just was talking and that didn't stop. And sometimes it happens when people get nervous. And so I wonder if, yeah, like a silent signal to like have the students do the next problem, or something like that. I might jump in and say, oh, as he's writing that second problem and it's obvious that he's about to just like go for it and do it again, I might say, oh, wait, let's just see, like, everybody's piece of paper, right? Let's just see, let's try it, like just kind of interrupt that moment before he kind of does the when he's already modeled one. Does that make sense? So I don't know. I mean, I know, yeah, it sounds like you guys are really, really well planned, but also sometimes in the moment you're like, wait a minute, like what just happened?
That's
So
not like
in
what we
those moments,
planned. And sometimes, like Kim said, they do get nervous. But another thing too is that there was really low student engagement. And if you're you're supporting her through preparing for EdTPA, one of the main things that they're looking for in all content is student engagement. How much is the teacher talking, and how much is the student? How much student interaction and student talking and dialogue is there? So maybe even like you said, the silent signal, doing a signal for her to do a turn and talk. Explain to your partner across from you what I just did in that problem. And then if you have any questions, we'll raise hands in just a minute. So kind of having the students engage in some conversation about what we just did and having some dialogue with that. We'll also support her with her EdTPA Task 2 video that she's going to be producing in the next few weeks to send to Pearson. So kind of thinking about those things as she's practicing now, so that when she does her videos, when she does her video clips, she'll have some quality clips with a lot of different things happening. Because again, you won't be able to do any in the moment coaching during those videos. So you want to kind of do some of that help now.
Gotcha.
All right. Any questions? Jared, I'm going to unmute you one more time. Do you have any questions?
I think I'm okay.
Okay. Well, I'm your faculty site coordinator.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being Our one participant, we really asked a lot of you, but I hope you like learned something.
Yeah, I
It's like
did.
2 on 1.
Thank you for doing the online
Yeah, of course. We prefer it
instruction.
to
Yes.
I prefer it as well.
And it's also good just to be able to walk through. And like I said, this one was kind of a repeat and kind of support of. We went over a lot of things during the CE orientation, and there was really no practice. But now we wanted to stop and talk and make you think about the practice. And like I said, in the what's next, we'll have more webinars. And Dr. Green sent out that schedule. But we'll also have a final follow-up for In the Moment coaching on March 17th. And we hope to have some videos to share, hopefully not just from you. I'll be mentioning this to some of my other CEs that have had the training before, just to kind of share their experience of what they've been doing in their classroom and how it's helping their teachers. We really wanted to do something this semester to really support our student teachers in the moment so that they can feel successful and see their own growth throughout the semester. So thank you so much for being a part of this. Again, as Kim said, and thank you for participating and answering questions on the spot. And we really enjoyed hosting the webinar with you tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having it.
No problem. Have a good night.
Good night.